Amelia, thank you very much for taking the time to come and speak to me today on Culture Corner, where I speak to leaders in tech about how to create strong cultures and high-performing teams. So it's great to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
No problem. Obviously, we know each other, so if we can kick things off by you just giving a bit of an explanation as who you are, what you do, your team sizes and responsibilities, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So Amelia Bampton, I currently work for Equal Experts, based out of the Manchester office. I've worked in tech for 20 years, so my kind of root and background in tech is through that kind of business analyst delivery. My current role is kind of client portfolio manager, official title engagement manager. And what that means is I run a number of different accounts and clients, and it's kind of cradle to grave care. Right. It's consulting. So we're only kind of go and build tech products. We're in a company for a period of time, can be short, can be long, depending on what we're doing. But I will work from the beginning, pitches, proposals, to setting up new teams, all the commercials, contracts around that engagement, delivery assurance throughout, through to, seamless exit and handover. So I touch all points of that kind of integration at the current time.
Right, the full spectrum then.
Full spectrum, yeah.
Well, you don't get time to sit down, do you?
No, but I'm my own worst enemy in that sense as well.
Perfect, thank you very much. How many projects would you oversee at any one time? Is there a specific amount, or does it vary on
I think you can't have any particularly hard and fast rule. It just what feels right sized and sensible for any individual. Right. Obviously, I work in a team at Equal Experts amongst many other engagement managers. Some of them run very large public sector, and they might manage that one kind of client because that is a full-time job based on the size of that account.
Right.
Currently, my portfolio is a good mix of startups, small to medium-sized enterprises, some large, but the kind of account, the number of people we've got in that is smaller. So it's such a balance. Yeah. And we often, as a kind of team of engagement managers, just check in, like, is the mix of client portfolio right for what we can manage in a day, a week, a month? Are we kind of adding value in the right way? Are we there for the client? Are we there for our team that are on the ground? So, and you constantly iterate and learn. Like, sometimes you put your hand up and say, my portfolio is feeling a bit big. I can't get across everyone. And, you'll have a sensible, pragmatic conversation with your team members of where there might be space to kind of share, because we pair as well, often on accounts. So sometimes I'll work with a colleague on a certain account so that we can share the workload, and, it just makes it easy when people are on leave and different things like that. It's a really great approach.
Brilliant. It does sound good. I mean, we'll dive into a lot of that later with the culture and leadership thing, but it sounds like it's a really great environment, inclusive environment, where you work as a leadership team and you can put your hand up and say, actually, are you okay on that, on your portfolio, or actually I need help as well? So
yeah, 100%. There's definitely space for that sensible conversation. Yeah.
Brilliant. One of the things we were talking about before we started was, in the tech space, we've both experienced it over the years, is getting people into tech, getting people to understand the roots of how to get into tech. So my first question is always to people, how did you get into tech? Was it always your career? Was it always on the radar, or what was your route?
So I've always worked in tech from kind of graduating university, which was my path. I wouldn't say that coming through my kind of educational route, I had my heart and, my eyes set on tech. I think because, I kind of went through high school in the 90s and then did kind of my university, my undergraduate and postgraduate kind of early noughties. And tech just wasn't spoken about at the high school levels. We've just mentioned your daughter's doing computer science, which is amazing. My two daughters are at primary school. They both do different variations of some kind of computer program, which is amazing. Really, and I'm really passionate about that. So now that's what they think I do when I go to work, because they just know mummy works in tech. But I mean, you can imagine the difference between the 30 years between them being at school and me being at school. But how I fell into it, to answer the question, I knew that I wanted to be in business. I think I grew up in quite a rural place in the countryside. Probably just watched too much kind of telly as it was in the 90s and just had these visions of city life and, you know, all that classic stuff and working in business. But I didn't understand what that meant. So I did business at college and then took a business degree. And I think the kind of sliding doors moment in my life and career is I did a business degree at Liverpool John Moores because I wanted kind of that city life. It was a good accessible city. The nightlife was great, which was a key criteria, if you know me, for me. And then, but what it was a brand new degree, which I hadn't quite appreciated when you kind of, whatever it is, 17, 18. And it was very focused on the combination between business and how it was enabling tech, which was kind of a newer topic of conversation at that time in the early noughties, to the masses anyway. And it was a step away from that traditional view of business, the HR, the marketing, finance, accounting, which I'd done at college. And I went to uni, did this business degree and just fell in love with the theory behind how technology was enabling businesses to grow, expand, globalization, all that kind of key stuff then. And that kind of set my path. I loved it so much that I came to Leeds. So I'm back in a city that's very close to my heart, did my master's here to just kind of increase my understanding of tech and give me as much advantage as I could to get a good career after the end of it. Also, the nightlife in Leeds was also very good. So tick that box off. And then started applying as a graduate and got approved to be a business analyst, which I didn't know what that was at the time, but it was a job and it had a salary. So me and my parents were very happy about that at the end of 4 years of uni. And it was down in London. And I used to do a Monday to Friday in London, but I've always been based kind of in the Northwest. Right. Northern girl, you know. So I used to travel to London for work.
Blimey, it's a big old commute, that, isn't it?
It is a big old commute. My kind of boyfriend at the time, now husband, used to hate the fact that I used to get the 5:30 from Stockport and he used to have to take me. And, you know, he wouldn't have to be up for hours, but I would be on that 5:30 every Monday down to London.
Yeah, I've been on them early trains to London. Your eyes still half glued shut.
I think I woke up and you're walking through Euston, you're like, why is everyone looking at me? And it's because you've been asleep on your scarf and, you know, you've got imprints all over your face and your hair everywhere. And you're like, well, I look great when I left, you know, Stockport. But good times. Feels a long time ago now.
And a good grounding as well, obviously. And your career's grown and grown from through, obviously, throughout the years. Successful female leader in tech now, obviously, hence the reason we're talking. One of the things I wanted to ask you that's come into is talked about quite a bit nowadays. Did you experience any sort of hurdles or bias throughout your career as a female in quite a male-dominated environment?
Not particularly. I don't ever think it's hindered or halted my career progression that I've known. Obviously, you don't know maybe any biases people have internally. If anything, I've always had really good supporting managers that I think have seen my potential and supported that and put me forward. Like, if anything, I can like book the trends a little bit with some of the kind of negative stories that you hear and definitely go on. You know, I came back from maternity leave to a promotion. One time, really supportive manager. You know, Vodafone as a company had great maternity policy, great return to work policy. You know, so I can only kind of talk about that experience, but to kind of temper that a little bit, you know, I've worked in all male teams, and where I have been the manager, I've probably been the youngest. And I think you have to, I'm not going to lie, but it could be the same for everyone. You have to kind of earn your trust and respect a little bit, you know, kind of coming in with maybe some aspects of your kind of demographics or, you know, against you. But I've always kind of come through to the other side that I don't think I've ever felt I've definitely not got promotions in the past, and I've understood why, and that's nothing to do with kind of my gender or anything like that. I was like, I wasn't ready, and I can see it for what it is. I was still grumpy at the time, but I can see it for what it is. So definitely, you know, it's a journey. Tech has changed so much, which is great to see, but everyone has their own story, and I've, you know, got some great things to share with my story. Yeah,
it sounds like you've had a really good journey and some good managers. So have you had people that have sort of inspired you or influenced you from your early career?
Yeah, so many people. I remember thinking I was when I was a graduate, so it was early noughties, down in London and in consortiums, which is where a number of big companies and consultancies come together to bid for big pieces of work because it's too big for anyone. And, you know, I was working with other companies like Hewlett-Packard and BT and Lockheed Martin, and, you know, so I was working with a lot of kind of really great experienced senior people when we were working on big bids in the public sector as a graduate. And, you know, all of these people were just so inspiring, different levels, different approaches. You'd get the odd person where you think, oh, I don't necessarily agree with that approach, or they could, you know, they're just a very different style to me, maybe a little bit more direct, which is something I struggle with and I'm working on. But as a sponge, which is the analogy I had kind of in my early 20s, I'd take on board the best bits of different people in different ways and be like, I love how they control that meeting, facilitate that meeting, or work with people individually to get the best out of them. Like, I had some great managers early in my career and just people that I worked with, and kind of absorbed their professionalism, their human-centered approach, and kind of took that forward.
Yeah, that's amazing. Actually, you just go in with the mindset and attitude, I'm just going to be a sponge, I'm going to learn, because you've got so much exposure to such a diverse set of experience and businesses so early on, which is great.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I'm forever grateful, because I think, like you said, you never know where your career is going. Even 20 years in, every corner, every chapter is a different flavour, and you can't foresee it for where you are. But that early in your career, getting that opportunity, being in London, you know, being around big technology implementations and projects, you're just picking so much up so early on, that I do feel that was a real springboard for the rest of my career. But I do also reflect and think, well, I made the most of that. It was never a wasted opportunity. I kind of relished most of it, not always the 5:30 starts and the late night Friday nights back and the sat on the floor of the London you know, train, as we've all been at, when it's over busy and overbooked. But most of it, I've enjoyed most of it.
Brilliant. Well, you've not waited for it. It sounds like you've not waited for a handout. You've gone to grab that and make the most of it. And is it fair to say that those experiences early on in your career and probably throughout now have shaped you to where you are? I suppose positive and negative experiences have shaped you to where you are as a leader now?
Oh, 100%. Like, I'm a very different person. I've said this a lot recently. You know, I can turn up and I can do career development talks to different groups of people, especially like coding boot camps. I've gone in a lot and talked about the non-engineering. Wow. And, you know, I stopped one talk once because I was like, just to let you all know, the kind of confident, you know, very extrovert, you know, positive, most of the time person you see in front, you know, that's 20 years work in progress, and it's still work in progress. Don't think that, you know, as a graduate, I was this confident in myself or in my abilities or in my, you know, I've kind of learned and unlearned a lot of things and still am to be the person I'm here now. But I think, to your point about grabbing it, I did fall in love with tech. I fell into it and then I fell in love with it. There's nowhere else for me. I love the fact that I've worked on some very varied different tech projects in very varied industries over my time today. And I've loved every one. I do feel like technology is changing the world. Want to change it for the better, do my little bit. But I just love the fact that we can, even at a low level, change people's lives, how they use apps, like how they just, very simple things. It doesn't have to be some big, amazing, groundbreaking change in tech. I just love that we make people's lives sometimes a little bit easier every day. I'm very dependent on my tech and saving time. And if I have to phone someone or go to a call centre for anything, the company's failed me, you know. So I love that I kind of fell in love with tech, and that's why, because I've loved my career, I've just tried to make the most of every day and every opportunity, make every day different. That's important to me.
Definitely. And I love what you're saying about giving back. You're obviously keen, you've had your experiences, but you're keen to pass those on and give back now, you know, with getting involved with the boot camps or the North Coders and things like that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's amazing. We're talking about school visits. So even in the last month with Equal Experts, we've got a big initiative partnered with HMRC, going into primary schools and doing a full day of introduction into tech. You know, I talked about my role, how I got into tech, what a business analyst is, trying to put it into language my own daughters would understand. You know, they were year 6 students that we met with, and just try and help people understand that there are careers and opportunities open for everyone in technology. And the roles are so varied, and they can align to all different types of people's kind of strengths, skills, capabilities, desires. So I love that, because it's really important, because I feel very lucky but also very empowered by the career I've had. You know, I'm very independent as a result of my career and my work life, and I want that to be open to other people. I want other people to enjoy their career and to, you know, feel they've fulfilled their own hopes, dreams, kind of from a career perspective, wherever it might be. And if it's tech, then let's all open the door a bit wider to help people with that. Yeah,
it's very important, is it? Like I said, we were discussing before, to actually, I still think a lot of times in school it's the text thought of, like, you're a coder. You know, you code and that's it. But like, as you said, there's such a diverse skill set available to people, and give people the option, you know, make people aware. But I think the only way to increase the number of people coming into tech is to, like you said, get in at school level, isn't it, really? I think, although my business partners go into universities and colleges and do very similar things to yourself to educate people around tech, I think at university it's not almost, you know what I mean, almost too late.
It's grassroots. You've got to get in grassroots and just, you know, plant the seed, let people know, because I think there was one conversation we're having. It's amazing the influence that some of those, even just one-off career conversations can have. I was having it with a group of, I think, women in business at an event a few weeks ago, and I said, what's it? My husband is a chartered building surveyor, and he says that was just one conversation that he had with the career coach at high school. And he said he liked drawing, you know, the kind of engineering focused drawing and technical focused drawing, and he liked houses. And they were like, oh, well, you could be an architect. And then he kind of looked at that career path and went, well, why don't I become building surveyor instead? And that was it. He's building surveyor for life. So this is it. Never underestimate the power of kind of the conversations people can have around their career early on, and the filter that sets for what they can achieve and also what they can't achieve. So it's about opening people's eyes up and giving them the belief and the courage to do and go after what they want.
Exactly. And the clarity, the route in order to get there. If you want to get there, there's now multiple routes, isn't there, to get into tech, not just your standard process, which is great. But obviously we're going to talk about culture as well. So thinking about culture and EE, what would you, I ask this quite a bit, what would you say makes what is a great culture, and what's the culture like at EE, and how do you, I know it's a big question, how do you evolve it and develop it?
So some big questions there. So in terms of what is culture, it's I mean, there will be obviously a definition that can be used, but for me, as more of a thinking, feeling type of person, everything will come back to how I feel, and that often comes out in a lot of things I say. It's like culture is that kind of sense of belonging, that you're in the right space with the right sense of mission. As a group of individuals, you all will be very different in terms of ideas and your skill set and, how you want your career to look, but you've got that combined sense of purpose and belonging within that company. And that's what drives you kind of to want to kind of do well, kind of improve your own skills and learning, do well within the team and do well for the company and your customers, clients, whoever it might be. So it's a feeling of belonging. As I've said quite recently, we've all been in those roles where it's a round peg in a square hole, and you know what that feels like. It's just that friction every day of, I just don't feel like I belong here. And it can be at many levels. I've been in companies where you're like, why does this feel, I'm not fitting, it's not right. And it's, you're not bought into the purpose of the organisation. That filters down into everything you do day to day. It just feels a lot harder because of that friction. Whereas, a good culture where it kind of looks and feels right to you as an individual, it's a round peg in a round hole. You feel connected to the company, their values, how they go about business, how they treat their people, their customers, and you just align with those kind of key aspects.
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like very much you hear stories of people end up in jobs and they've not really thought about the purpose and the why of the business and whether it fits with them. And then because obviously we're going to talk about high performing teams, you then can't create high performing teams, or it's very difficult to do because your purpose isn't aligned with the business, so it makes it more difficult to hire the right people and that kind of thing. So it sounds like that's something that you focus on when you've been looking for a role, and you found it at EE by the sound of it.
I said to someone, we've just had the recent kind of UK-based London conference, which a lot of kind of our colleagues globally also attended, which was great. And I said to a colleague from the US, because it's coming up to a year that I've been in Equal Experts, and I said, literally within the first day, within the first week, I felt like I'd come home. Because there was just such an alignment. I just felt right. I felt I'd found my space. And it's interesting because, the job spec, what I've just explained that I do is similar to what I've done in other places, but it's just that kind of feeling of fitting, belonging, and being kind of aligned to the values of the company, how they go about business, how they go about kind of working with their people and with their clients. It's just aligned to how I like to work every day. I like to treat people as individuals. I like, everyone to bring their own ideas and feel comfortable enough to kind of speak up and share, and for people to have the space and autonomy to kind of change and go about their day job, their business in their own way and style, as long as you're just communicating and aligning with the rest of the company, not, everyone working on their own way in silos, but it's just that alignment and communication. So it's more alignment and communication over command and control. And for who I am and where I am in my career, I just love that kind of space and autonomy to bring my whole self to work and be able to kind of do what I need to do, explain the day job, but in my own style and way. And it's just because almost like you can sit down and a breath of fresh air and just crack on. There's no need to do something in a different way that takes cognitive load or energy.
Yeah. So it's really a culture where they're empowering people to do your best work. They're giving you the opportunity to work autonomously within some parameters, but very sort of inclusive environment.
Amazingly so. And what's interesting is I felt that on day one. I've had the polar opposite experiences where day one you're like, oh, this is not the right fit for me. And you can see it through, onboarding activities, and it's something can't always, I'm sure, grab it early on. Some people, it can be a bit of a learning curve. Oh, I took this job because it looked great on paper, the package was what I wanted right now, and tick, tick, tick. And then they get a few days, weeks, months in and be like, oh, there's so much more to what's important to me, and that's misaligned. So it can happen in different ways, but definitely with Equal Experts, I knew it was right from day one, and I've just kind of loved it ever since. Very, very enthusiastic about how they go about their business. And when I was on board and meeting people, what's interesting is so many people have just so many positive things to say, like our associates, people that work within the kind of tech teams, even if they're not actively working with equal experts now, everyone that I have met since been like, oh yeah, I've only ever heard good things. And so it's people speaking highly of the companies you work for, even when they're kind of not actively engaged, is a massive, big tick about a great culture. It's that organic kind of sharing of the benefits externally as well.
Yeah, they're like promoters of the business, even though that they're not working there, aren't they? Which is that's next level stuff, really, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I've just been one of the most recommended books that have kind of come up for me when I've been looking for book recommendations, Turn the Ship Around. I'm sure it's a common one for a lot of people, but I loved in that about how the different measures that you can look at for kind of high performing teams, great cultures, and it's not just about achieving what you need to do in the short, medium and longer term from a business. It's the kind of, even when people are rotated out of leadership positions, the continuation. So you're setting the company, the team, the culture up for success. I think one of the quotes from, that you could be there one day and not the next, and the team would still know what to do because the values, the beliefs, the processes are so ingrained that you don't need one person there in a command control structure to have to keep reminding and reinforcing. And I love that, and I think that's what you can see, that's what I see in my role.
Because command and control is almost like a dictatorship a bit, isn't it? You do as I say. You're not empowering the people within your team to run with their ideas or evolve. It's just you're just passing instructions or information down. And
the term they use in that book is that kind of the change from leader follower to leader, which I think is a nice, really simple way to be like talking to that empowerment of creating leaders around you that you're not having to direct ideas or command or control. It's giving people the space, the autonomy to come up with their own decisions and be able to have the safety to talk about why they've come up with that decision, and then be open to discussion if there's kind of disagreement. But I love the kind of phrasing of that, because I think even early on in my career, we talked about what I learned. There was an element, I spoke about all the positives, but I'll also talk about the unlearning, where I probably did see a lot of command and control. It, was a little bit more, I think, common, more recognised, 20 years ago, and leadership has evolved and we're talking about it more, hence this podcast. But I think I had to unlearn some of that command control. I don't want to sit here and be like, oh yeah, leader, and I've always done that and I'm enlightened. There's an element of me unlearning some of that, kind of what I thought a leader and manager looked like in my early career, to be like, oh, actually, it's not about me having all the ideas and being right first time. It's about encouraging an environment it's safe, where we all come up with the answer solution way forward.
Definitely. Massive credit for evolving and changing. And was it difficult to realise you needed to unlearn, and then was it difficult to unlearn? Was that quite a journey?
I think we're all still on a journey. Do you know, I was just reflecting on that. You can talk, like I was thinking about some of the themes we were going to touch on. I was like, I'm going to talk about this leader, but do I go into a meeting? And sometimes I think when you're trying to add value, be conscious of people's time, be a good facilitator. I'm very action orientated, so I can jump right in, set the tone for the meeting, but also set a little bit more the kind of solutionize very quickly is something I'm mindful of that I do. And so I would say, to answer your question, no, I'm not there yet. I have to reflect and be like, oh, could I have given more space for other people to kind of, for us collectively agree, how do we want to run this meeting? But I think the mini milestone and win is I'm now conscious that I probably could step back a little bit more, leave a bit more space in the discussion, in the meeting, to help shape that. So I'm on a journey with that. And I suppose the other part of the question was, has it been hard to unlearn? Massively. There've been I talk about life and career as a roller coaster. There's ups, there's downs, there's loop-de-loops, and I've had massive learning curves where I've got it wrong. I got it wrong as a manager. I was a new manager, had no coaching, anything, late 20s, kind of came into a team that I didn't know before, kind of got appointed as head of this team. I'm really I think I put my guard up very early on in terms of, I'm the manager now. I need to have all the answers. I need to kind of bring all my experience and share that with the team. And I think I carried on like that for a long time, and it was emotionally draining to try and, show no weakness, no vulnerability. I'm the man, I've been appointed because I've got all the answers. And it was only when I literally didn't have the answer anymore. And I've talked about this story in other kind of career talks about the unmasking of, like, I literally went into a meeting and I just said to the team, how are we going to work this through? I've no idea. I think there was a couple of swear words in there, which were unusual for me at the time. I think the group have been more often now. And they just had never seen this more vulnerable side of me. And it almost in the room, the energy shift. And we came out in the next few days, weeks, months of my time with those kind of colleagues and that team was just totally different, because I had taken my guard down. Literally, we connected on such a more personable and human level rather than just kind of colleague, command, control. And I was like, I haven't got the answers, what do you think? And it's that classic, as we've just said, the leader, giving people space to help you come up with the solution. And ever since that point, I was like, well, I can't go back anyway because they've seen the real me. So what's the point? It was really hard work to kind of be this version of myself that didn't come naturally, because naturally I am outside of work quite a human-centered, personable person. To be in this version of who I thought a manager would be was actually exhausting every day. It was just such a breath of fresh air, and it was a massive light bulb. And that must be, it was well over 10 years, well, late 20s, a long time ago. And I've never gone back since, because so much was better and different after that light bulb moment. It was a learning for me. But it's that classic, sometimes how many times you have to get it wrong to get it right next time. And that's why I actively go out and share stories. Everyone's career is different, but if I can help someone save a bit of time and mental exhaustion, putting their guard up, wearing a mask, whatever it might be, that they think, I heard Amelia say that she wasted a couple of years trying to be a version of us. Why don't I try something different? That's what it's all about for me, just sharing your stories to try and help other people.
Definitely. And that's what the podcasts are all about. This podcast's all about, as we were saying earlier. And it must have been quite liberating for you when you to do that. And you were creating a psychologically safe environment without even knowing it, doing it. Years ago. But if you think when we first came into our careers, that was everyone thought management was like that. You had to have all the answers. Someone asks you a question, you've got to know. Almost do as I say rather than any other way. And it's just pivoting and changing so much now.
So much, and that's the fact of unlearning. And there was another great quote that I've heard recently. It's very naive as a leader, as a manager, whatever term you want to use, to be like, I've learned everything I need to know. Now it's only for me to impart my knowledge and wisdom on my colleagues, on others, should they want to. And I love the fact that it was like we should all be learning, growing, unlearning, looking to be kind of educated. The world of work, as we've seen in our careers, changes all the time, that you have to be prepared to be open to kind of active learning and knowing how you can do things differently. Like, how much have we said that we've both learned, phrases we didn't even know of 20 years ago, now part of everyday work life. You have to be open and receptive to understanding those ideas. And I love that. I love learning and changing and trying new things to improve myself and improve, the work that me and the teams I work with can produce. And
you've got to be humble, haven't you? You can't be an ego there. Anyone with an ego, excuse me, is no good at all. You've got to be humble enough to realise, okay, I need to know more, or I didn't get that right, and constantly reassess and move on. So is... Obviously, it's a strong culture at EE. As a leadership team, are you empowered to sort of evolve that and develop that? Is that something that you focus on and how to improve it constantly, or
yeah. And I would say just to that point, because it's a flat structure, there is no hierarchy, so there is no leadership team per se. Just to be clear, we all have different roles, responsibilities, so it's flat. There is no hierarchy, there's no kind of leadership team. What there is space for all of us, kind of regardless of role, to come generate ideas. And we have something called the advice process, where we share ideas of things we'd like to do. So in my time, mine have been centered around events, which is more aligned to where I can add value. Like I've taken equal experts to different tech events in Manchester we've sponsored or we've participated. But what you do in order to kind of do that is that kind of alignment and communication aspect that I mentioned. You write an advice process which gets circulated, on Slack, a paper about what you're intending to do, why, what you believe the kind of the benefit will be. And it's not for people at certain cost implications. You have to kind of align with more people, obviously. We said, there has to be some kind of sensible guidance. But, for a lot of things, it's like just getting feedback. Maybe you get some questions, get some open discussion, or just general context. Or we did that a few years ago. This is what went well. This didn't, so it's just about promoting a conversation that you're informed and enlightened to kind of decide, is that the best use of budget at this time? And then you report back. After, for me, it's been around the events and talk about how that's gone and share. And just so I learn, but the company learns as well, we're sharing that learning across the company. It's brilliant, that. Yeah. It's really accessible for everybody, isn't it? Yeah. I might have got this wrong, but last time we met in Manchester, did you say the company had run an event around psychological safety at the time? So yes, we'd had some of our kind of employee consultants go into a tech meetup and do a talk. Julia and John went in at a tech meetup to talk about psychological safety. But psychological safety is a big part of Equal Experts culture, a big part of how we set up our kind of tech delivery teams. And one of the key aspects, and we're very passionate about it, it's not a one-time thing. It's not a workshop at the start or partway through or at the end. It's an ongoing review, and we actually have mechanisms in place that every account can track their psychological safety. You've got neutral facilitators that are there to kind of, and as an engagement manager, you can track how things are going on your engagements. Anonymized, but you can get a kind of a temp check on, this team aren't feeling that psychologically safe. There might be a lot going on, and then it gives you just a bit of an indicator, maybe out of your portfolio, which teams need some help and support. We've got some great facilitators within the business, and you can request the services to get a neutral facilitator in. So someone who's not on the account to come and run specific like psychological safety deep dives at any point, but also if you feel the team need a bit of support in that area, because, there's like key connection between psychological safety and high performing teams. And it's not about a group of individually great or excellent skilled people, it's how they interact together, which is going to give you the real magic and value with, and give everyone a good time as well, in terms of feeling safe enough that they can be their full selves, they feel safe enough to speak up and give feedback on the team, ways of working, how things are going on the client. It all adds to kind of a much better experience. We've probably I know I've probably had times in my career where you feel unpsychologically safe. I might not have known it at the time, I might not have known the term, but now you do learn about that. You can look back and be like, I can see when I've been on a great team, I've felt safe enough to speak up, to influence, to change, and when I've been a bit quieter. And that's a massive indicator. I know when I'm feeling kind of stressed or overwhelmed, because I go very quiet, and there's probably part of that you don't feel safe enough to speak up. So you just head down, crack on, and
Yeah.
I get a bit passive aggressive. So I've seen the flip of that when I'm feeling confident, I'm feeling connected to people, I'm feeling energized and safe enough to speak up about feedback or creative ideas. You can see the difference in individuals' demeanor and how they kind of show up for work as well, you know.
That's brilliant, like that. So you've obviously got a feedback loop going on across your
All
accounts.
the accounts.
Yeah. And is that just, I suppose, anyone for listening to learn from, are they sort of fortnightly, quarterly, or ad hoc? Are they
we try and have per account a regular kind of more weekly cycle.
Oh, brilliant.
And then that gets kind of shared with the engagement managers. It's voluntary, so it's not compulsory. So, you know, sometimes, and to keep it anonymized, sometimes on the smaller engagements, you have to do things differently. But yeah, just always a regular cadence, and then, you know, how people opt in to kind of be part of that can differ.
Perfect. And then it's the account the delivery manager's responsibility to act on any feedback.
Yeah, we get the results played back to us monthly. So there's a collection. You can start to look at trends and have discussions where trends are tracking up or down.
That's great. We were talking earlier about your experiences as a leader and a successful female leader in tech. What would you think your biggest achievements are, or your greatest achievements so far?
Yeah, great question, and one you do have to kind of reflect on a little bit. For me, it's about the impact you have on other people's careers. As I said, you know, I'm always quite passionate and talk a lot about, you know, enabling everyone to find a career that lights them up. You know, if that's tech, great. I can help a little bit more than other industries. But I think my greatest achievement is actually seeing what I say that I'm passionate about in action. It's that feedback from people that I've worked with. And hearing their stories and their career successes long after we worked together, long after I've kind of, you know, worked with them or they've been on my team. Like, I had this great example of, not that long ago, a graduate from when I was at Vodafone sent me a picture of a book I'd given her at the end of her kind of time with us on our team in Vodafone. And I'd kind of written some kind of notes in this book and personally, and just, you know, wished her all the best. And she said, I just want you to know that I always think about the time we spent together in the book you gave on kind of like leaderships and career. And it's, you know, always, you know, given me the confidence and the courage to kind of, you know, be who I want to be, my career. She's gone on to do amazing, wonderful things. So, you know, fully taken her career to its highest, and it's amazing to see. And then other times, I think other people that I've worked with that might not have been directly in my team, but we've kind of caught up here and there, like apprentices that also came into Vodafone. Even on a leaving drinks, you know, a year after I've left the company, you come back to see your old colleagues and they talk about, you know, the things that you said and the impact you made that even at the time you didn't think you were doing some like great motivational speech. It's the little things every day. And also, you know, at times where you don't have those kind of female role models, you know, people have said, seeing me carve out the career that I've had, you know, moving into different roles, picking up different experiences, you know, then also kind of being a working parent as well, as sometimes just gives people the confidence that they can find that balance and make it work for them. So for me, it's the feedback from people I've worked with that you've had that positive influence.
Yeah, that's great. And it's something you said there, I love it. Having sort of the emotional intelligence and understanding to write the note in the back of like a personal handwritten note. And somebody talked to me about this last year, and because we were talking about sort of celebrating success, recognizing sort of people's achievements, and to the point of even just writing a card and saying, look, thank you for what you've done, and highlighting X, Y, and Z. It goes a long way, doesn't it? And I think people maybe won't remember who you are or what you've done, but they'll they'll remember how you've made them feel, you know.
Yeah, it's amazing. And anyone hearing this now, I mean, the book, and that's why it was such a shock when I got that kind of message on LinkedIn. So many years had passed, and it's just funny because I give everyone a book now for everything. And as a wedding present recently, I gave someone the Jay Shetty book on love, and because I've run my own book club, professional book club in the past. It kind of is a bit of something that's aligned to me. But even at that point in my career, I was giving out books. I was like, oh, maybe there was always that connection. It's not a new thing. It's funny to see the trends in yourself.
Yeah, but it's great to have that feedback, isn't it, and see how that you have impacted people that you've worked with or supported or coached or managed throughout your career. So that's amazing. One of the things that I wanted to spin back on was we talked a little bit about psychological safety. Obviously, you spun up loads of teams in your career, whether that's teams from scratch or, you know, hybrid teams that have already been there, and then you add on to them. How do you create, as a leader, how do you go about creating a psychologically safe environment for your team? You build that sense of belonging and trust.
Yeah, I think for me, it goes back to recognising and giving everyone space to be their individual selves. Not for me, my learning is not to try and cookie cutter everything and be like, you give people space to be themselves and let the team. I think a lot of it comes with self-organisation. It's not me saying we're going to be a psychologically safe team. That is like nothing that you can achieve there. It's about the team forming, mobilising, self-organising, encouraging the team to work through. Everyone will have different levels of experience, been on different projects, especially in consultancy. People have seen it done, just general team ways of working, and team connections and processes. People can have good ideas that they bring, or they've seen it badly on a previous project. They definitely don't do this, but it's not about me as delivery lead or whatever role that I've got, trying to set that team up for them and say, now I've set the team up like this, we've got this ways of working, this process for delivery and path to production. It's never going to work. It's about the team working through and feeling safe enough that they can share their ideas, have open discussion about what's best for them as a team. Because that's the thing, in a consultancy, you're constantly forming, back to that forming, norming, or storming, norming, performing. You go through that cycle a lot, new teams, as you've said, new clients. Whereas when you work in-house, you probably hopefully find that you have that cycle a bit less regular because you're full-time and teams tend to not change as much. I imagine in consultancy, so you have to be prepared for it. But the best way that I found to find a high performing team is give the team the space and the safety to kind of come up with those ideas and suggestions themselves, and to kind of be what we agree on day one doesn't have to be right on day 60, 90, 180, like that feedback loop, which is why I love retros. It's like constant feedback loop as a team. Actually, this didn't work for me, that sprint or whatever time frame or period of time you're looking at. Can I suggest different ways? And the true sign of kind of safety would be for that feedback to be received well by the team, an open discussion, even if everyone doesn't agree with it, the space to come up with maybe an alternative solution that works for everyone. So, it takes time, but it's about kind of appreciating that just by bringing a team of individuals together doesn't guarantee ultimate kind of success for tech delivery. Right? There's a whole space for forming that team, people building kind of trust and safety between their team members.
So you're acting as a facilitator, really, ensuring everybody has a voice and contributes almost. Do you find sometimes you might be drawing people out or drawing them into to help them get involved a little bit more to create that environment?
100%. And it's about, that's a great role of a facilitator, which is a skill that I've had to and have adapted and grown over my time as a consultant. You're constantly in meetings, running meetings, trying to get the best outcome in the best, most efficient amount of time, conscious of your team's time, conscious of the client's time. So key facilitation is paramount to the role that I do, and it's about managing the conversation in a room, knowing who's not contributed, giving them space. But also, anything is always, there's many layers to it. it's knowing why someone may or may not be speaking out. So even I've had lessons learned. I was doing some lecturing at Manchester Met University and trying to encourage people into the conversation, you know, and I got feedback then from some people that didn't feel comfortable. So it kind of was a lesson sharing within the room for different reasons.
Okay,
and then it's a case of, you know, a light bulb moment for me of maybe just kind of trying to check in with the audience, how you can bring people in at different times as well, because there's many reasons people might not be sharing in the room. But yeah, to that point, it's always good to try and bring people in, but also being aware of why people might not. And psychological safety is sometimes a key reason people don't speak up and share. So how can you make sure there's safety in any meeting, in any room?
Right.
So,
that makes
many layers.
So not everybody will want to communicate verbally or ready to communicate at that point in time. So you've got to be emotionally aware, emotionally intelligent enough to realise that and understand your team.
And so that's it. So that's the point, you know, I'm always learning, and I started to build in as a result of that feedback. And it was great that they felt comfortable to come and give me that feedback at the end of the lecture. I started building in different mechanisms within the room. So Post-its on the board for feedback. Yeah, obviously I'm available, email, whatever, you know, which some of the students use it, but I try and encourage feedback in the room, but written as well, so you didn't have to speak up, and just to encourage different ways to kind of feedback and contribute to. Not all of them always made the most of that, but at least you know that you've kind of you're showing that you've listened, you've heard what they've said, and you're trying to adapt as a result. That's
brilliant. So you're setting a stage where you're saying, I want everybody to contribute, I want everyone to have a voice. Not everybody will be happy verbalizing their opinion, so the alternatives are like X, Y and Z. That's brilliant. That's really good.
Every day's a learning.
Well, yeah, it is. Absolutely, isn't it? Absolutely. One of the things you mentioned earlier, I'll let you finish, but I must ask you about that, is obviously quite often in high performing teams there's a high level of trust. So also people who feel a high level of trust can obviously voice their opinions, and you might often get conflict, or especially if you're trying to innovate, and I suppose that happens quite a bit in tech. Do you have any strategies for dealing with conflict if it arises within your team?
I think I don't have a strategy per se, because like we said, every situation, you know, based on the people involved, the client is so unique. You always have to take it as it is. I think something that working with conflict is something I have to work a lot harder on. It's not a sweet spot for me, and I'm kind of self-aware that like what I have to do is make sure that I'm leaning into it, and you're not leaving it with, you know, being so over positive around it. It will resolve itself. I think what I've learned through my career, again, the kind of life lessons is, for example, I had a very difficult team member that I used to manage at that time. I took up my first leadership role. But what I found is that making sure that I always fed back to them when something kind of hadn't been quite professional, or how they'd approached a situation. Sometimes if it was near the end of the day and things got a bit heated, I might have to come back first thing in the morning to that individual. But what was interesting, and that when I talk about my greatest achievement, I do think of this person as well, because they thanked me at the end of our kind of time working together, which had many ups and downs, was my consistent approach to just, they really struggled with their self-awareness, and they didn't understand their language and behaviours, what the impact it had on other people, which was an amazing journey for me to be like, when I give feedback, this person really doesn't know. It's not that they've been intentional, they didn't know the impact it's had. So I was always consistent in feedback, that over time they would be more, they grew their own self-awareness of maybe it's not right and proper to say that in a meeting or in the office. You know, they're only trying to get the best outcome, but there are ways and means and appropriate ways of communication to go about that. So I think it taught me that even though it's hard to have difficult conversations, it's important that you do lean into it, because sometimes people don't understand the impact, or they don't understand, the impact it's had on someone else. That if you lean into it in a timely manner, the path beyond it is much less bumpy than if you leave it, turn a blind eye, be overly optimistic it'll resolve. I've learned over time the trend is it probably won't resolve and it'll get worse. So face into it, as difficult as it might be for me and anyone else. Just try and have fast feedback cycles is the key term.
That's really good advice, because I think human instinct is to sort of shy away, isn't it, from conflict? And I'm massively try and shy away from it, and it's because it puts you outside your comfort zone, doesn't it? But like you said, if you don't let it fester for too long and you action it and you give that constructive feedback, and you're able then to move on, because they don't resolve themselves, do they? No, quite often not. That's what it's taught me. So you have to kind of take the deep breath and just face into it. I've seen it be kind of the situation better for it as a result. I know you're super busy, so I won't hold you too much longer. One of the things I wanted to ask, because you spun up loads of teams in consultancy and throughout your career, do you find there's very similar traits when you put teams together, or very similar sort of personalities? I don't know if I explain it well, but do you have a doer and a completer finisher? Do you see a pattern to the teams?
And no, again, it comes back to that point. Every team is so varied. I think that you can't guarantee that every team you spin up, you're going to kind of cover all those bases. Right. I think it's interesting. Another kind of light bulb, kind of key life lesson I had early on in my career is when we did some kind of personality testing, like mid-20s. Right. I'd never done it. At that point, didn't have the self-awareness that I'm that doer. Like I said, I jumped to solutions, to very time efficient. What's the quickest way? The quickest way isn't always the best way. Have we all given ourselves enough time to come up with the best solution? I just want the quickest solution to then crack on. So, but I didn't have that self-awareness. I thought that was a great trait, mid-20s, when you're full of gusto and confidence. And we did this personality trait, and on my team at the time, it was so interesting. To your point, we did all kind of fit a different bracket, and the way they brought it to life, it was the colours training, which I'm sure many have done in different ways, but the kind of personalities or kind of personas they used was like chefs. So you had, as a yellow in this test, you were Jamie Oliver, very people-centric, extrovert, kind of, quite kind of good, communicative with people. You had your Gary Rhodes, who's very meticulous, measured, very specific. And then you had your Gordon Ramsay, who's really fiery, assigned to a different colour. So we had these different chefs to bring to life what it meant to kind of sit, and obviously people have different variations of cut, but it was a big life lesson for me, because I was like, I was a Jamie Oliver, I was very people centric, I was on the extroverted scale of things, but by goodness did I need the kind of data-driven, meticulous people that kind of came under the blue, Gary Rose heading, for example. And you could see where your colleagues sat, and some of us, were varied in different ways. And it just was so enlightening that actually it was really helpful in my career at the time. I was like, this is why it's helpful for me to be in a balanced team, because I'm very quick to jump to solutions, and I won't have the kind of the meticulous data and analysis to back it up. So it's good that, I've got so-and-so on the team to balance me out. And it's not a negative that I find a bit slow, like that should have been done yesterday. Come on, very gung-ho about stuff. So that was a real key lesson for me. And at that point, we did have quite a good coverage. So kudos to my manager at the time, whether it was intentional or not, that, you want to shape a team to touch on. So you can't guarantee it, though. It's not like the law of probability that if you build a team, it's good to be mindful of it so that you're not in danger of putting the balance too much of too many kind of Jamie Olivers or too many kind of Gordon Ramsays, which is going to be too fiery. I think if you've got that appreciation, it's helpful to try and shape the team as best you can to cover the bases, but also to understand people and where they're coming from and what that means for the team. If you understand, so now I'm like, it's a Gary Rhodes, brilliant. How do we get the best out of them? What are they going to be, more comfortable space for them? And it's understanding people as individuals that you can try and encourage the best out of them on the team as well. So that was massively helpful life lesson for me.
And it all loops back to the trust, doesn't it? Because you're saying you've got to want to understand those individuals, like care, trust, and then you get to know them. Then it's only by really getting to know them you'll know the type of person they are and how you can get the best out of them. So you mentioned you talked about vulnerability earlier, like your light bulb moment. Excuse me. Do you think, which is important for building trust, and the dynamics within the team change completely when you went through that process? Do you think you can show too much vulnerability as a leader?
God, this is a great question. I think I'm going to say no. And everyone, I've had this conversation with one of my mentees actually about vulnerability, and I probably use that example, which is why I say I do reference it a lot, but it was key for me and quite pivotal in my career. You've got to be yourself, and it's not saying my level of vulnerability. Like I say, the version you see of me in the office now is the version you see of me outside of work, in the gym, wherever it might be, meeting my friends for dinner. There's kind of one version of me, and I feel confident enough that probably comes with a sense of vulnerability, of people know a lot about me, about my life. And what I'm concerned about, where my strengths are, where they're not, and someone else will have a different level of vulnerability. And it's not to say you should be more or you should be less. It's about right sizing your level of vulnerability and how that feels for you based on who you are at that time, if that makes sense. And I said to my mentee, it can be trial and error, but if you're in maybe an unpsychologically safe environment that you are vulnerable and you feel that has negative connotations, you might iterate and learn and maybe be a different version of yourself. I was like, tactically, but you need to look at why that you kind of feel that you need to be less vulnerable. That would be a bit of a red flag that maybe you're not surrounded with people, the right culture to bring yourself out. That's what I mean. I feel confident and safe enough and to be my full self in work, and that means that I can be vulnerable. If I was in an environment where I felt I couldn't, I was a little bit more guarded, that now would make me question, am I the right fit? Am I a round peg in a round hole here?
Yeah, definitely.
So I think it brings a few aspects together of what we've discussed.
Connotations, doesn't it? Yeah. Do you think you've been a really successful leader because you've got high emotional intelligence? I listened to you talk about understanding your team, how people behave, how your sort of emotions and reactions, and you're very aware of them, affect other people. Do you think that's something that's stood you in good stead for you?
I think it's definitely helped. I'm a people person in a tech industry, but people are core to tech delivery, so it's definitely something that's helped. It's not the only thing, like we've just said, about everyone's different, have different levels of the strengths and what they bring and their values. So for me, it's definitely helped because I work with a lot of people and teams, and I'm trying to create high performing teams. I can read people quite well. I can sense when maybe someone's a lot quieter, which maybe means there's lack of safety or they're feeling overwhelmed. So I can read people quite well, that you can kind of try and catch things a little bit quicker. And like we said, being that vulnerable person, I try and make it safe that people can open up to me. So it's helped, but it's not a prereq. I wouldn't want anyone listening to this being like, oh, well, I wouldn't class myself as being that kind of people focused, but I still want to go into delivery. You just dial up, you are who you are, and you bring your kind of strengths to work. I mean, I've got a terrible analogy of, like, I call it Bob the Builder, but probably just like like tool belt. I mean, all the different tools in our tool belt, and that's fine. Do you know what I mean? Because within the team and the teamwork, as we've mentioned, the tools that maybe I haven't got or I'm not as good as using, Adrian can come in. And that's the teamwork aspect. So never look at someone and be like, well, I don't see myself there. Yes, it's helped me. Do people bring different aspects into any role in tech? Yes. And just lean into that. And don't be scared to kind of talk about your strengths and, you know, and areas where I need you to come along with your tool belt and help me with this job. Is that okay? You know, let's crack on together.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And being humble enough to understand that, isn't it? And appreciate that. I think, last quick question, because I've been bending your ear for ages. There's a lot of discussion around transparency with your team. We talk about it at work quite a bit. How much, I've heard a couple of analogies, the umbrella analogy where you protect your team from everything, and someone introduced me to the heat shield analogy where you obviously just letting certain things come through to your team. Where do you sit on transparency with your team, with information?
Great question. I think transparency is important. And it's kind of a value that's key to me. It again brings in so many aspects of that vulnerability, trying to read the leader model. So if I'm over here as a he guard, whatever, trying to come up with all the answers myself and only giving certain aspects of information, that's not empowering my team that we collectively come up with ideas because they haven't got the full wealth of information. So for me, transparency is important. And, you know, we talk a lot with tech delivery about, you know, working out in the open. So it's being transparent. You know, I have to be transparent a lot with, you know, I'm thinking this and thinking this direction. And it just builds up that kind of human-centered approach to, we're all trying to do the best we can with what we have. You know, I'm thinking this, you know, before I go and act on something or think I've come up with the right answer with the information I know, let's talk that through. But again, it comes back to the environment, your team, and the nature of kind of what you have. You don't, at the same time, you don't want to set hairs running by sharing information too quickly that could be perceived in a certain way. So it's about using your kind of emotional intelligence to read the room, but wherever possible, I would say transparency is key, because one might have some information, some feedback that can help you go forward. You know, it comes back to that aspect of the conversation. Yeah,
it goes beyond bringing your team together and saying, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. It's try and share as much information as you can for them to make an informed decision to then move on. But having the barometer, like you said, of not giving them a certain bit of information just makes people panic. So it's a fine balance, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And like a lot of these kind of very difficult topics, there's no hard and fast rule. And sometimes, like yourself, you know, you'll try something and you'll iterate and learn, and that's what it's all about. It went well, let's do it again. Oh, it didn't go well. Oh, what can we do differently? And that's okay, you know. Another topic, you know, that's been mentioned a lot in a lot of the books I've read is about that, you know, if you're not failing enough, you're not experimenting enough. And that is, you know, prevalent in a lot of the professional development books, and it comes back then building a company where it's safe to fail, all the key things we've talked about. So you've got to keep iterating and learning and not feeling bad about the fact, oh, I need to iterate on that now. That's great. You've tried something and you're going to improve it for the next time.
Yeah, it's having that environment where it's safe to fail, isn't it? You know, and there's lots of places that don't create that. Obviously, you don't want to continue repetitive failure on the same thing, do you? But it's safe to, everybody fails, everybody's human, don't they? It's, but you don't want a big bollocking for doing that. You want to be able to move on from it. So that's great. Listen, thank you so much for your time. I know you're super busy, and thanks for taking the time to come in. I've loved like your raw honesty and it was brilliant. But your self-awareness of like, this is what I'm good at, this is where I've evolved over time, constantly looking to evolve, constantly looking to learn, constantly looking to develop, like really humble. Like it's brilliant, and I think, and I understand exactly why. You know, you are a strong leader, so it's been great to have you on. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Problem. Cheers. Thank you.